You know what time it is, no matter where you've been. So let's do it again. Listen up and let the sun shine in. We've got soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
Hey, what's have you ever lifted weights a lot and on purpose to like the
On purpose.
yeah, to get big or strong?
I've dabbled now and then.
Yeah, sure.
You have you? What's one of the best ways you think to build muscle mass?
Well, you got to lift, but you also have to eat. Is that what you're going at?
Yeah, eat.
You're going to talk about candy
Lots of
again?
protein.
No,
Yeah, get those building blocks.
no candy. I just we're going to talk about obviously about cheating scandals and those kind of things.
I
But
thought you were going to segue from eating scandals.
no, there are no eating scandals. I don't think. I did
about,
see we did have a
Examples of cheating in an eating competition.
we did have a local guy. I know him well. He I don't know how many hot dogs he ate recently. I don't know. I wasn't prepared to talk about how many hot dogs he ate. He came in second. He was the number 2 guy in the nation. He ate more hot dogs than everybody behind him. But he's actually the mascot. He was for the Tennessee Titans, and he's a Kentucky State Trooper also. He's from Horse Cave, Kentucky. Cave City, Kentucky. I'm
Just
sorry.
go ahead and give the address out there.
No, I can't do that. Well, he's on Facebook.
Okay.
But you got me sidetracked. Eating, and there are no eating scandals, I don't think. But we're going to talk about cheating and what people do to gain an advantage. When I was about 15 years old, I weighed 220 pounds, and I was really into weightlifting and eating. And one of the things I would do on my lift nights, I didn't know anything about steroids, thank goodness, or supplements, but I read or somebody told me in the late 80s potatoes are full of protein. So I would eat 8 baked potatoes and the skin with a bottle of Catalina salad dressing on those potatoes. That's what I did to gain muscle mass.
Wow.
And a half a gallon.
Is that true about potatoes?
Yeah, I always thought it was.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I like the skin for
really
roughage.
Yeah.
So that's how I gained my advantage back in the 80s, was just eating a lot of potatoes and baked potatoes. It would take me 20 minutes I do it in the microwave. My dad would have those ready for me when I came in from working out. Ate them all. I mean, I'd go through a bag of potatoes and 50-pound bag in a couple of weeks.
I hadn't heard that.
You haven't heard that one?
I hadn't heard about potatoes.
Oh, yeah. That's the original supplement, I think, right there. But
Now I've heard people doing, eggs and stuff like that. That's animal related. Has a lot of protein in it.
yeah, me too. I mean, kind of. But potatoes are my favorite.
So what's this got to do with cheating?
Well, some people don't view
because you have to be careful what you do in front of potatoes. They got all those eyes.
Zing!
Oh, that was early in this one.
As Scott Bradford would say, zing. People use different things and techniques to gain an advantage. We're going to talk about cheating and the wrongness it is to cheat. There's nothing wrong with being competitive, but we have seen, especially in sports the last several years, people not eating potatoes, but choosing to take performance-enhancing drugs and steroids and all those things to get big but get faster. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how in other competitions that people will do most anything to gain advantage. We're going to look at the Bible for some examples too as well.
Before we get too far into it, I just want to bring up that in the past month, there have been, probably past 2 months now, several headlines made from different cheating scandals. And I'm going to go real quick through these just so folks know why it's on our mind. One, there was a chess championship cheating scandal where this young fella had gotten his rank in the chess world by cheating online. He would use a separate computer to plug in moves and then go back into the actual game he was playing. He would cheat that away.
But he was competing online.
He was competing online. He had 2 computers set up or another window or something where he was There was a cycling cheating scandal where this guy was getting into different events, lying on his resume, more or less. Somebody cheated at poker. No surprise there, except for they cheated somebody out of almost $300,000.
Wow.
Took them off the Christmas card list. And
But perhaps the one that is my favorite of the cheating scandals. Am I allowed to have a favorite cheating scandal?
well, sure, it's just us.
Yeah, it's just us.
Sure, why not?
There was a fishing tournament where these guys cheated. Now, how might one cheat
I love this one.
at a fishing tournament, you might ask?
I would think if you had a faster boat or a bigger pole or
Those seem like competitive advantages.
better worms.
But, yeah, right. Well, what these guys did were they caught fish, and then before they went back to get their fish weighed and all that, they would just open the mouths of the fish and pour lead weights into their bellies, so their fish would weigh more.
Solid.
Yeah, right. So,
Yeah, but not only lead weights, they also put fillet of fishes in there, like McDonald's fillet of fish.
Did they really?
Inside their fish. Yeah.
how big are these fish these guys are catching?
Bigger than they were.
Yeah, I've never caught a fish that big.
I've never wanted.
I might be able to fit a couple of weights down their gullet, but I've never been able to shove another meal inside of one.
I'm too compassionate. I wouldn't want to do that.
No,
I feel bad enough about putting a hook in them.
you do.
I do.
Well, you're a tender-hearted fisherman. Maybe you do something else. Because if you're afraid of putting a hook in a fish, you're not going to be real successful. But anyhow, that's why we were talking kind of about cheating and so one's integrity and credibility, that sort of thing. And so, Daniel, I will now.
What about like all those? What about all those college admission scandals that came out not long ago? People were cheating on, making it seem like they were part of sports teams that they were not a part of to get scholarships.
Yeah, that's kind of going back to the lying on the resume type of thing. We've got
Yeah.
that. We've got some other well-known cheating scandals. Back, it's probably been, good grief, 20 years ago now, when several guys in Major League Baseball had gone before Congress and testified that they weren't using steroids. Well, everybody in the world knew that they were, and they later found out to be.
I mean, I was never in the gifted and talented program growing up, but it was obvious that they were.
But anyhow, let's get into the meat of it. That's the reason. So let's talk about how it connects to the Bible, how it connects to our lives.
The only thing I would lead off with, and then I'd like to let Daniel kind of fish around a little bit, is for me, I define, cheating, lying, and when I think of the things I need to stay away from in my life, and it's sin, and if I always go to Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 19, and as you turn, or a while before I read this, I think about the things you just mentioned, the cheating, everything from fishing to athletics to business, all those things. Why do people do that? It's just simply out of selfishness, pride. I don't think you can say, I've had parents defend their kids and say, well, he's just competitive. That's why he did it. But yet, if you peel the onion back a little further, no, he's selfish and he's prideful. And I think we all have to be mindful of that, because Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 19, the work says, now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, which is, also cheating, fornication, uncleanliness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, which leads to cheating if you want something someone else has bad enough, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, a.k.a. pride, dissensions, heresies, envy, cheating, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So cheating is nothing to, while we've made a few, little laughs about some things, but at the end of the day, and at the end of our life, cheating is nothing to laugh about or to minimize, because it's very, very serious that we should not cheat. So for me, that's a definition not only of cheating, but also the parameters of what we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, and cheating is certainly not a new problem. There's examples in the ancient world of people cheating. There's even, especially with regard to cheating in business. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1 says, "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him." That's an old trick of merchants would be when you're weighing out how much of a product is being sold, to have the scales artificially adjusted, so it seemed like you were giving more product than you actually were, or in some way manipulating the weight so it wasn't true. You had a different set of weights to weigh in your favor instead of being standardized. Just finding ways to dishonestly deal so that you gain and somebody else falls behind.
And sometimes, I mean, I'm not a business owner, but I imagine sometimes it's real easy to not do the right thing. Whenever you do the right thing, it's probably going to cost you. Where not doing the right thing, nobody would know about it except you. You might benefit financially or whatnot. But ultimately, that sort of thing will catch up with you.
It does. Again, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 9 says, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out." I think that's exactly what you were just saying, that eventually, if you take those dishonest shortcuts, it catches up with you in the long run.
I guess I go back to, and not everybody that listens to our podcast is a lover or liker of sports, so I don't want to relate everything to sports.
Some of them like candy, apparently.
Yeah, that's right. I'm thankful for that too. Candy and potatoes and fishing. That's all things that I like.
And obscure 1980s references.
Yes, I love the 70s. I can take you back a little bit to the 70s, but I do remember that time, that period of time when we had, and I often wondered, you had major league athletes, and talking about the baseball players, McGuire and the Sosas of the world, and then there's some other folks that kind of came after them. They were kind of in that mix too, and I can't, their names escape me right now. I think there was a Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
I'm thinking of Rafael Palmeiro. He played for the Orioles, I think, at that time.
Okay. And of course, there was a whole list of them. But,
there was a ton of them.
But some just seemed to excel. They might have had better juice than the others. And then, of course, you take, and I don't know the science behind all that, but if you could take all the things they were taking and then connect that with their DNA and their athleticism, it just makes them that much higher. They're greater. But I often wondered during that time why. You're already performing at the highest level. You're financially secure, and your children and grandchildren and beyond are financially secure for decades. Why? I guess that's the why. Is it just simply they kind of forget about the money? It's just all about the winning now.
Well, I think that brings up another interesting ethical question. Is from what I've heard, and speaking about baseball back with McGuire and Sosa and Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, those guys, is that from what I've been told is that steroids were so rampant, this is their excuse, it was so rampant throughout baseball, if you weren't taking it, well, then you were at a disadvantage because everybody else was taking it. So
they looked at it as a tool.
This is their excuse, is you had to do it in order to be able to perform just as good as the other guys were doing.
And be relevant.
And to be relevant. Right, but that doesn't make it right. We know just because everybody else is doing something doesn't necessarily mean that's the right way to do it.
Daniel, we're hitting the ball.
Yeah, well, for an athlete, I think the difference between good and great is it can be pretty slim. And so if you have just the slightest little bump, it can make the difference in you being a star or you just being a role player.
But what it has cost those fellas during that era,
Not so much money, but
not so much money, but their integrity, confidence you
Reputation.
have in their reputation, the trust in them. It's the same thing that in our lives, if I'm known as a cheater, known as someone that's dishonest, it will be the same things that affect me. People won't want to be around me if I'm a well-known cheater.
that's their legacy.
And right.
And I would think they're connected to what I call a conjunction. What I mean by that is, fill in the blanks. I'm not a baseball fan. I always liked their hats, and that was about it. But you can fill in the blank. So and so was a really good Major League Baseball player. Here's the conjunction, but. That's what you think of, but they were at Congress or in front of Congress, or this is what happened. And it becomes their label. There's always an association, with all of us, we're visual people, or when we hear a name, something pops up in our mind. And when I hear some of those names, I'm like, oh yeah, there's, I can see them in their uniform, but I can also see them in front of Congress. And
as Christians, our mission is to go out and preach the word, right? If we're well-known liars and cheaters, we're not going to have that influence
credibility.
Who's going to listen to us if that's our legacy? If in the record books we have an asterisk next to our name because we cheated and it's so well known.
Even if that, like you said, they defend it by saying that it's right. I've again not a baseball fan, and I want Daniel. I don't because I want to come when he finishes. I want to come back to politics, and I guess I'll move away from sports. But I always heard that a friend of mine told me he thinks Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame as a player. But then at the footnote or at the bottom of his plaque or bust or whatever they have, note that he was banned and this is what he did, but put him in as a player because you can't take that away from him. His performance. Along those lines.
Well, for those that don't know, he was accused of betting. He was accused of betting on baseball. Was he betting on his own team? Is what he said.
It was, yes. Yeah, I watched the documentary, and it was.
But regardless, you're not supposed to bet on baseball. But
they had him. They had him to rights. I mean, dead to rights.
But in the Bible, we do have some examples of well-known cheats or liars. I guess. Daniel, you want to go over some of those?
Well, one that came to my mind is the story of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. If you're not familiar with their story, they were at a time where people like Barnabas were selling all they had and giving it to help the poor in the church. And so they were people being very, very generous. And so Ananias and Sapphira seem like they want to get in on that amount of praise and recognition, perhaps, that reputation, trying to steal some of that reputation. And they go and sell some property. They only give a portion of the proceeds to the church to help the needy. And that's not the problem. The problem wasn't that they only gave a portion. They didn't have to give it. They didn't have to sell the land. The problem was that they misrepresented that portion that they gave as if it were the entire amount. So they were trying to cheat the church, I guess it is, out of honor and reputation. They were trying to cheat and get praise that they weren't that they didn't deserve, and that didn't work out well for them. And the apostles said, "Why are you lying to the Holy Spirit?" And they both were struck dead, and there was great fear that came over the church as a result of it. So we can cheat, we can lie, and we can fool the people sometimes, but God knows what really happens. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 22 says, "The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy." And so as Christians, as people of God, our reputation and our trustworthiness has got to be worth more to us than whatever would happen from dishonest gain, misrepresentation, things like that.
Daniel, as you referenced that, there's something I know you can't see because you're in another location. If you're here, I will show it to you. But Acts chapter 5, at the end of verse 4, I have highlighted, I don't know what years ago, maybe look, I've got a note here, 2007, with a pink highlighter, and it says, "You have not lied to men, but to God." And
Exactly.
and that to me, that hits me right between the eyes. That that obviously God is all knowing, but you've not lied to men, but you've lied to God, and I think that's a reminder to all of us that. While we may think that we have got one up on a competitor or something, that God still knows.
That's right. It's so silly to even attempt to lie to God. It makes me think about. Um, I won't use the real names in case somebody listens to the podcast, but my wife tells about someone she knew uh, in childhood that had gotten into a strawberry patch and had strawberries all strawberry juice. His face was stained with strawberry juice, and his grandmother said, "Did you get in the strawberry patch?" And he just swore up and down, "No, I didn't get in the strawberries." But the evidence was all over him. It was silly for him to try to lie. Well, it's the same way with us and God. The evidence is all over us from His perspective.
Joe, were you up?
Am I up? Well, I was just looking at John 8:44. It says, this is Jesus talking about Satan. He says, when he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So we know dishonesty, cheating, whatnot, that all is, it's sinful. It comes from Satan. He's the one that started it in the garden.
Deception.
With
At
deception.
its height.
And so, yeah, we're talking about cheating, but that includes dishonesty, not playing by rules. I also think of Judas. And these people in the Bible that we're talking about that are notorious rule breakers or lack that integrity and credibility, that's something that has been put in the Word of God to warn us about what not to do. So Ananias and Sapphira, we shouldn't do what they did. Judas, taking money out of the treasure before he betrayed the Lord, he was stealing from the treasury right there. He wasn't playing by the rules there. So the things we know about him are all bad. He had no credibility even before he betrayed Jesus.
I want to give you one. I sometimes get carried away and give. Daniel talked about using a story or an anecdote, but this was, you couldn't make this up. And then I wanted to reference Genesis about cheating within the marriage, but in a neighboring county, let's say, not in our county, but a funeral home director. This really happened. A funeral home director told me once in a small community that he was coroner in his little community for about 30 years, but not consecutively. He said that there was a 15-year break. He said I was about 15 years in, had a gentleman who ran against me and he beat me. But he said, I was suspecting that there was some cheating going on. And through some research, and I submitted a request for the voting records and all of those things, those documents. And to come to find out, this gentleman had forged the names of people who were deceased. And he said, I had pronounced those people deceased when I was coroner. He said, so when we went to court, I presented death certificates to the courtroom of people who I had pronounced dead, but they voted against me. So he laughed and he said, in our little county, we always say 110% of the population votes here. But the rest of the story was he got reelected. He lost his lawsuit on some kind of procedural something, but he got reelected the next term, and he had a total of like 30 years as coroner, and then he had a very successful funeral home business in this little community. But I'm like, wow, cheating for a little political office, and then you encroached upon those who have died, tried to slander them, really. But so sometimes 110% of the people do vote.
I think, obviously we're not going to dive into current politics on here and divide everyone. Alan, we're not going to. But I will tell you, I found a story of Lyndon Johnson. Did I share this with you guys?
No, I know about Lady Bird.
Well, it has nothing to do with her, not to know of. But anyhow, the 1948 election, he stole a Senate election in Texas. You can read it. There's a Washington Post story dated March 4th, 1990, entitled The Mystery of Ballot Box 13. And essentially, there's a little town there. Johnson was a few votes behind, and the good old boy system prevailed, and suddenly a couple hundred
Came in.
new names voted for him that were handwritten in a different colored ink than all the rest of the names. And here's the weird thing. Apparently all of these people that showed up to vote lined up in alphabetical order whenever they signed the voter registration.
That's cool.
Yeah, because it was all in alphabetical and all in the same handwriting. But anyhow, cheating, it's been around. We've seen that it's been around in the early church even. It's in sports, politics. It's something that's very prevalent that we need to guard against and be vigilant against those thoughts, because sometimes it seems like maybe cheating is pretty easy to do.
When you least,
but it's not worth, the repercussions. But when we think of cheating, we think of that differently than maybe a little white lie or something. But I think honesty is of utmost importance.
Barney Fife said,
It is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to, Barney.
No, go ahead.
He just said, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive."
That's exactly right.
Sure.
Bernard P. Fife.
We've kind of been focusing on dishonesty as the major problem with cheating, and it is. But another problem morally with cheating, as for a Christian, is cheating is selfish at its core. It's a selfish act that gives us advantage over other people that are facing the same challenge that we are. And as Christians, we're supposed to be seeking to help others fairly and justly while maintaining our moral integrity and our reputation. And cheating just doesn't uphold that standard. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves." And so if I'm cheating, I'm inherently trying to put myself above other people in a dishonest way, in a selfish way. And it's not Christ-like.
How would you all broach the topic of cheating? Within the marriage. We've talked more about money and politics and sports, but
you're not playing by the rules there either if you're cheating in your marriage.
Well, I go back to one of the ultimate marriage vows, Genesis chapter 2, beginning in verse 24, where it says the verse 24, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." So that's the seal. That's the marriage vow. I've only, in my lifetime, I've done a lot of funerals, so I've only done one wedding. But I always focus, on verse 24. So, and that's a whole nother podcast. But I think about how in the U.S. about how our families' marriages are just hammered by marriage, divorce, remarriage, or cohabitation. I had a teacher in a little preaching class I was taking once, and he said that the reason why the divorce rate is stagnated is because you're not having people getting married. He said the major problem is cohabitation, which means my mama would say shacking up, living together. Yeah, so that's cheating.
There's a problem with commitment in our society in general. And here Joe was giving us to wrap it up fine, and Alan mentions cheating on our spouses. We could go off on a whole, like you said, another podcast on marital fidelity and infidelity.
But still, Daniel, that still even cheating in marital relationships is going back to selfishness and somebody putting their own wants above that of the greater good and of their spouse. So that's what it boils down to. As I was going to ask you guys, why do people cheat? But
Galatians 5.
Yeah.
What I started out with.
That's exactly why they do it. It's selfish ambitions and everything you've read in Galatians 5.
It is. So I guess at the core, our answer is it's selfish. So don't be selfish.
There you go.
All right. So does that pretty much get us for this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think you guys, I think we covered it. Thank you.
Pretty fast and furious there.
It was.
I like it.
Who are
Yeah.
very furious, but sure.
Well,
Yeah, cut that out. Yeah, cut that part out.
you might be furious if you were the victim of cheating.
That's
Something
true.
that you really cared about. You might get pretty upset about it. Well, dear listener, we want to thank you for letting us be a part of your day today and your spiritual journey. We value you and appreciate you so much. We hope that you'll contact us if you have some questions or some comments to add to this discussion. We'd love to hear about it. We want to thank the elders at the South Green Street Church of Christ for making soul training possible. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Big Show Joe, and my co-host, Alan Jones. And I'm Daniel Gaines. And until next time, keep soul training.
Soul training. Time to practice what you preach. Ooh, yeah. Yes, we do. We've got soul training.
To learn more, you can email us at soultrainingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can write to us, P.O. Box 503, Glasgow, Kentucky, 42142. That's Soul Training.